Thank you for listening to the Speaking Out on Sex Abuse podcast with hosts Clara and Jimmy Hinton. If you're new to the podcast, please subscribe and share so you will never miss an episode. Android users can find us and subscribe on your Play Music app. Apple users can find us and subscribe on Apple Podcasts. You can find us on Stitcher. You can follow us on Spreaker. And you can find the podcasts on jimmyhinton.org or findingahealingplace.com. Please rate our show, subscribe, and share so that we can spread the word. Let's get into the show. Welcome to this week's podcast. I have with me my mother.
Hello, everyone.
And our special guest, Christine Parker from PorchSwing Ministries.
Good morning. Glad to be here.
Thanks for joining us. This is
Absolutely.
exciting. So, I guess we'll just jump right in and let people know about PorchSwing Ministries. And I got to tell you, Christine, I send people to PorchSwing all the time. Yesterday, I sent like 5 people over there, and I routinely send people over to PorchSwing. So hopefully they're actually migrating over there and checking it out, because it's a really cool ministry.
Appreciate that. Appreciate it very much.
So, give us a little bit of history for our listeners, for those who don't know about PorchSwing Ministries.
Okay.
Let them know what it is and why you started it.
Okay. Brief, right? So, I've never been one known to, in fact, I describe myself as one who does not tell stories in a linear fashion, but I will do my best. PorchSwing Ministries ministers to survivors of all forms of church abuse. So typically we think of church abuse as sexual abuse of children, and the survivors as adults today. And that is a huge, huge portion of what church abuse is. There are so many others who have suffered abuse at the hands of church leaders, church members, and congregations as a whole who have not been sexually abused and suffer as much and are in need of care. And PorchSwing Ministries ministers to all people who've been abused by the church, by church members and leaders. And it's interesting you say, why did I start PorchSwing Ministries? Because you have been such a part of that why, Jimmy. And it's something that I have wanted to do for many years. We started in September, got our articles of incorporation for a nonprofit on September 27th. But the ministry is something I've been doing actually for decades without realizing it, just walking through life with people who've been so hurt by bad theology, by being told you have to forgive no matter what anybody's done to you. Mm-hmm. And you have to do it right away. And it's not about the other person, the person who sinned against you. Forgiveness is about you, so you can heal. And it just never made sense to me. Yeah. People who have been shunned and outcast for their own sin, despite their repentance and their, God's forgiveness. People who've been outcast for tiny little things, the spiritual abuse side. And so just having a heart for people who don't have a place at church, despite their profound love for God, despite their profound love for church, for the lost, and wanting to serve God through his kingdom, through the body of Christ. Moving forward quickly, because you said to be brief, and I can't do that, as you can see now. my nonlinear storytelling. When I discovered what was going on in my family, and that all these years I had been used by my husband, who was a church leader, as a cover story for his life, and realized that I was a survivor as well. I went through a very devastating process of discovery and then healing, and began to get calls from around the country from people who began to hear, because we knew so many people. So, we were very connected in church leadership, church but around the world. We'd been missionaries. We had been we just were very connected. I started getting calls from church leaders saying, "Hey, can you help me out with this situation? I've got somebody that I think has been through something similar." And I don't know what to do. I don't know how to help them. So that started happening. Of course, you knew my story, and we were good friends and became better friends. And I knew your story. And so I just started getting calls from people, and found that not only through the devastation and discovering what had happened and being able to see it better and more, and also through the years of having ministered to people who were hurt by church. But now through my healing process, I had more to offer, I guess, as I experienced God's healing. God's profound healing in my life. I was now on the other side, and able to say, look in people's eyes and say, if God can heal me and my sons and what we went through, and of course healing is a lifelong process, but if God could do that, he can heal anybody. He can heal you. And so, boy, when Me Too happened, and it was gaining steam, and then Church Too started. I texted you, Jimmy. I don't know if you remember this, but I texted you and I said, "This is going to happen in Churches of Christ," which is where we're primarily affiliated. I said, "This is going to happen, and I'm seeing signs of it. And it's going to be big, and it's going to hurt."
Yeah.
And it has to happen. We've got to have, the truth told in our faith tradition as well. And when it does, we've got to be ready. We've got to have people in place that our faith tradition knows about, so that we can take care of survivors. We can, your ministry, jimmyhinton.org, can be there to help in those crises. And you said, yeah, it's going to happen. We didn't know when, where, or how. And about, 9 months, a year later, it was last August, we just started being inundated with calls about Churches of Christ that were doing the very thing we were talking about, protecting sexually violent predators,
lots of people in leadership who are predators themselves, whether it's sexual predators or just spiritually abusive.
Yes.
You and I shared.
Oh gosh, August was a horrifying month.
Yeah. Yeah.
And predators of children, predators of adult women, abusive leaders. It was, and September wasn't much better, and it just kept going. And so, I was just inundated with phone calls and emails, and it was time. It was clearly time to organize my ministry that God seemed to be kind of at that point shoving down my throat.
Yeah.
Because I was kind of floating along going, well, boy, it would really be nice to have a place for all these people who love God profoundly and long for kingdom community, but church has become so painful. They walking into a church building hurts. It hurts emotionally. It hurts physically. It hurts spiritually. And so I was talking to another friend, and I said, yeah, this is my dream. I'd never really shared it with anybody. And I said, but I don't have, and he said, well, why don't you do it? And I said, well, I don't have any money for it. And he goes, well, you can wait around for the money, or you can do it and then see what God does. And I was like, well, okay. So I did it, and it has absolutely, I don't know what the word is. Blossomed is too small a word. Exploded, just like rocketed to outer space. It has grown so fast. I can barely keep up with it. It's phenomenal. And I stop every once in a while, and I can't even describe what it feels like to sit back and think, I get to do this. Like, I get to meet and talk with and email with these beautiful, precious souls and who love God and are so wounded and so strong and so powerful. And I get to remind them of that.
Did you ever think 4 years ago, when you were in the epicenter of your grief and discovery and all that stuff, that you would be where you're at now?
Oh God, no, I didn't know. I mean, I was just thinking this morning about, and I don't know what made me remember it. A moment, my oldest son would have been about 19. My youngest was 14. This was just months after finally was able to move away from my husband. It was very complicated to get separated from him because of the church wanting us to stay married. And I was looking for a full-time job, and there was a very significant complication that I had no control over. I had a job offer, a very good one, but because of some higher authorities, I couldn't take it. And I absolutely fell apart. And I was sitting at my computer. I'd gotten an email about it. My oldest son was in the room, and I was crying. Oh my gosh. The words that came out of my mouth wouldn't surprise some people, but he saw that, and he sat there just quietly, and I don't know, it was probably 10 minutes that I was rocking and saying, I don't know how I'm going to support he was a college student. He was back from his freshman year. So he must have been 19. And I kept saying, how am I going to support Noah? How am I going to do this? How God, what have you done? And I don't know which one of us called, the preacher from the church that we had gone to. And the preacher in our situation was very good and very kind to us. It was other leaders that were difficult. And we went over there, but I was thinking about that this morning, that was a year after I discovered what was going on. Did I think I would be doing this? Oh my gosh, no.
Yeah,
2 years after, 2 years ago, I mean, I was so much better, but it took 2 years to stop questioning what I had done wrong in my marriage. I was married to someone who was abusing me for 23 years. Not physically. There were never bruises. Couldn't see it. Everybody loved him, adored him. So no.
Yeah. Well, I think it blows my mind, and it's not surprising to me that PorchSwing is growing so quickly. Because I know in my heart, and I know in my inbox, that there is a sea of people who are out there who are madly in love with God.
Yeah. Who
can't physically step over the threshold inside of a church building because of the degree of abuse that they've experienced. And the irony in it And this is what's frustrating for me as a church leader myself. The irony is that for the people who need the most nurturing by the church community, as they slowly pull away from that community to survive, they get more abuse heaped on top of it. And they get told things like, well, you're not really committed to the church. You must have this underlying bitterness in your heart, and that's causing you to let your faith waver. You're not forgiving enough. You haven't healed enough. And they hear all these things that are not helpful to somebody who's internally bleeding. They're bleeding out. And, we talked about this in another episode, but it's akin to somebody walking into a trauma center because they genuinely have physical trauma.
Yeah.
And the trauma doctor either spins them on their heels or says, you're too broken. You're just not healed enough, and you need to go figure this out or get out. And they do. And our churches have not become hospitals for broken people. They've done quite the opposite, in many circumstances.
Well, it's interesting, excuse me, that you liken it to the spiritual and emotional trauma. You liken it to a physical trauma, and that, ER doctor would never send away somebody who's experienced physical trauma. Emotional and spiritual trauma is physical. And, we can't separate our brain from our bodies. We think that way. We think dichotomously like that, as if, the brain is an organ that's separate and apart from the rest of our bodies, but it's not. And, it is an organ of our bodies, just like our liver is an organ in our bodies. And, we don't walk around going, I'm having a really good liver body day. Or, our spleen. Oh, my spleen and body are in really good sync today. If my liver isn't functioning well, the rest of my body doesn't function well. If my liver is traumatized, the rest of my body is traumatized. Everything's affected, including my brain, which, by the way, is an organ of my body. Yeah. So if some organ, especially a major organ, even the appendix that doesn't do anything, if it's broken, the rest of the body is traumatized. One organ is traumatized, the rest of the body is traumatized. The same with the brain. The brain is where we experience the cognitive pieces of, and this is a really crude breakdown of what happens with trauma. It's where we experience the cognitive pieces of a trauma, which then cascades all the rest of the pieces of trauma, the emotional, the arousal, so anxiety and fight, flight, or freeze responses all comes out of that. But our bodies, all our other organs, our bones, our skin, everything is then traumatized because our brain is an organ of the rest of our bodies. So it's
probably the most crucial organ.
Yeah, because, you can kind of live without some of your liver. You can live without your appendix. You can live without a lot of organs, or if they're broken, you can do something about that. But you can't live without a brain. At least as far as I know. Some people might think I'm doing that. But we kind of force ourselves to function as if the only thing traumatized in a trauma that doesn't do any damage to any visible damage to any other part of our body than our brain organ, we just push through. So I'm constantly telling people who've experienced trauma, you need rest. They talk about, oh my gosh, I'm sleeping. There's a difference between not getting out of bed, sleeping around the clock, and that kind of depression, and taking naps because you're exhausted.
Mm-hmm.
Because this trauma is physical. You can almost see somebody who's experienced a trauma or grief. Oh my gosh, people feel so guilty for their grief and how it's affecting their physical lives. Same thing, but we don't shame people for their physical experience of grief, but we do for their physical experience of trauma.
Yeah.
I don't remember now how I got off on this rabbit hole, but so that connection between the ER doctor who's not going to turn away someone who's, lost a leg, hopefully at least give them a pair of, what are those things called?
Prosthetics.
Well, yeah, I was thinking more along crutches. At least give them crutches if you're going to turn them away, right? At least that. But, if we can't see the trauma, we think, oh, it's not that big of a deal, Yeah. But it is. It's everything. Just as much as if you lose a leg, it affects your brain organ. Because it's all connected.
Christine, I think you're hitting on stuff that's really, really important. When we can't see the physical evidence of pain, it's almost impossible to sympathize and empathize with those going through it. And we have an incredible ability to mask our pain because we've been taught to do so.
Yes.
Very rarely do we wear our pain on the outside. It's very easy to mask that because it's our shield from getting hurt even further. Yeah. And I think something evolved with the church, all churches, over the years. It has not been the hospital that it was designed to be for hurt people. It has become that place where we go to be refueled in a really positive, happy way. Many churches have coffee and donut hour prior to worship. We raise our hands and praise and, sing these beautiful hymns and hear a perfectly timed 18-minute sermon. And we walk out feeling absolutely incredible because we've been on that pew, and we expect everybody to feel that way. That's not how it works with people who are going through this process of this intensely incredible trauma.
Well, here's the most important part. It's not designed to work that way.
No,
you look at the early church, and it was people who took care of people. And Paul said, if one part of the body hurts, the rest of the body hurts.
Absolutely.
Talking about the church body.
I think over the years, I think the church, the whole concept of church has evolved into this place where you are supposed to be supercharged, super happy. You walk through the doors and you put on that happy face and everybody's positive and you clap hands and you hear music and you walk out and that's how you're supposed to be. Yeah. We've lost the concept over the years of what the church actually is.
Clara, I think, yes, you hit on some really important stuff there. And it's not just the people who have experienced trauma, significant trauma. It's not just abuse survivors who come with their masks on. Everybody does. Everybody has pain and sadness, and it's not safe at church. Why is it not safe at church? Because of so many reasons. And as you were talking, I had, memories of several different instances where, so I freely cry at church. I don't care where I'm at. I've learned to, there are sometimes when you just can't can't hold it in. Although I have learned to hold a lot in, I just haven't been able to. And I don't care what people think. But basically they don't touch you. And that's fine. But, when there is in an attempt to bring lament, to bring the pain and the sorrow into church. It's typically very, in my experience at least, very packaged, very, let's keep it safe. Let's not let anybody get beyond the point that we can manage it. Very clinical. And so I've experienced that in churches, where, they'll bring in their mental health professionals to plan the service and have people around the edges who can talk to you afterwards. And we're going to do it really carefully so we can open up the lament and then it does shut it down, and then close it down so that nobody gets overwrought. And that's good in a way, but the reason it has to be done that way is because it's not that kind of pain and sorrow isn't, generally speaking, welcome at church. It doesn't come as part of the natural undulations of the body of Christ. The typical expectation is what you described. We come, we are happy, we are energized for the week ahead. And the typical message is, there's nothing to fear in this world if God is on your side. That Romans 8 is all about, you can't be afraid. And all the church marquees that say, anxiety, that imply that anxiety is a sin, which I don't agree with, and I don't think it's biblical. I think we're invited by God to bring our worries and our anxieties to God, and carry and share His yoke, which makes the fearful world a lot easier to traverse, as opposed to being shamed and guilty of sin for being afraid in this difficult and fearsome world. But when we hear the message that there's nothing to be afraid of because God is on your side, rah, 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 then it disallows bringing those fears, bringing those anxieties, bringing the tears into the church building for everybody. And so if an abuse survivor or the parent of a child who has died, or somebody who experiences depression because it's genetic in their family, brings their tears and their fears, nobody knows what to do with it.
I so appreciate what you've said, Christine. I really do. I can remember way back as a kid laying out our church clothes the night before church, polishing shoes. Back in the day, I'm dating myself. My parents had such a messed up marriage. They would fight and scream and yell and curse each other out all the way to church, walk through that door, and all was wet.
My hair's crazy.
And we'd be wearing, me and my sister would be wearing our church dresses. We'd sit on the pew, sing Jesus Loves Me and all those songs, walk out and get into that car, and the fighting would just begin again and again. Never did my parents share what was going on. Right. It was they had to be like everybody else who sat perfectly on the pew. That's what it was about. And that's not what it's about. But all my life, that's what I was taught. And it became very difficult for me as an adult to do, as you said, to sit on that pew and share tears, to lament, I never did it. I felt I needed to be stoic in all things. And that's not what God wants His church family to be.
Well, as you guys were both talking, the movie Super Size Me came to mind. And I thought, we've
Jimmy, right?
Well, we've like, if you think about it,
we've supersized church.
Yeah, we have this mega church model: grow your church, do it quickly, get people in the door and out the door. Don't address any issues beyond surface level issues, because it takes time, it takes effort, it takes energy,
and it doesn't feel good.
Yeah, and it doesn't feel good.
That's it, Christine. It doesn't feel good.
And so when we're on this steady diet of something that like in Super Size Me, he the guy's eating it, and the fast food chains have made their food like very addictive. They dump all kinds of salt and all this stuff that your body has this physiological reaction to. And we've made this addictive food where you crave it, but there's no real nourishment. And so if we have a steady diet of this kind of church experience, it leaves people very shallow and very sick.
I love that analogy. Yes. That's a great analogy. Really is. Really.
Well, and the thing about it is it doesn't feel good to cleanse. I call it soul surgery. The lament, the healing process that we all need for whatever. And there's no anesthesia for soul surgery. It's painful, but it's a healing process that when you get to the other side is so worth it. Yeah. And so your analogy with the food is really great. It's not fun to get off of sugar or reduce your carbs. Oh my gosh, I love bread. Oprah, I love bread. And it doesn't take long to get addicted to that good feeling of, the comfort food. I can eat a bag of Ruffles and a whole thing of French onion dip in one sitting. I allow myself to do that once a year. I do. That's it. That's my thing. Yeah. And I'll confess to you, I've already done it this year. So I can't, but if you do it all the time, it doesn't feel good to get yourself off that stuff. But once you do, and you're eating good food and healthy food, you start to feel good, but it takes time. That one bag of chips and that one thing of dip, boy, that brings instant gratification. But the reversing that process does not. Reversing the process of pain and trauma to heal doesn't feel good, but it is so worth it because the long-term benefits, just like the long-term benefits of eating kale, which I happen to like, not all forms of it, but of eating, cooking with raw foods, and it's worth it.
Yeah.
But it just doesn't feel good to get there.
Right.
Yeah. Well, why don't we talk about we'll do a transition, talk about our fundraiser. So I'm helping Christine do a fundraiser for PorchSwing Ministries. And I think I just kind of randomly came to you one day and was like, hey, I have this idea that just popped into my head about a fundraiser.
Yeah, it was a little random.
Yeah. So you're like, oh, do tell. So
I think that is exactly what I said.
Yeah.
Do tell.
So I was like, okay, I'm going to do a mile walk in the snow in my sandals, which isn't atypical.
No shock. I was not surprised. Like, sure. Okay.
Cause I love the cold and I constantly go out fully exposed. Okay, not fully exposed. Wearing shorts, t-shirt, sandals. So anyway, I approached you about doing a fundraiser, and you're like, I love it. Let's do it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So on February 15th, I will be walking a mile in the snow, hopefully the snow. Punxsutawney Phil tells us that
you can go up to Seven Springs or Hidden Valley.
Yeah,
we can go further away.
Find snow. Yeah.
So I'm going to walk a mile on February 15th for a fundraiser, and at the end of that, if we reach our goal of $5,000, and I should say only if we meet our goal of $5,000,
right?
I'm going to jump into the creek at Blue Hole, which is a beautiful, very cold creek with lots of ice. I've already been in it this winter.
Jimmy, tell me, how disappointed will you be if you don't get to jump into that water, if we don't raise the 5,000?
It's funny because I talk about this with people, and I'm like, every time I drive past a frozen over pond or like a lake or something like that in the wintertime, I get so distracted because I'm like I rubberneck and I look over and like my head snaps over. And Natalie's like, she's like, quit it. I'm like, I just want to go swimming.
His mother is saying the same thing.
So So yes, I absolutely love swimming in.
So this goal of $5,000 is a gift to you.
It
right?
is. It's a selfish. Yeah, it is a selfish. Never mind raising money for Porch.
No. Don't say that.
I want to get in this water.
But you won't if we don't hit our goal, which you set of $5,000. You will not get in. I promise you, we're going to do this Facebook Live, and Jimmy will weep if he doesn't get in the water.
I will be incredible. I'm like, it was 50 degrees yesterday and sunny, and we just had like -10 with -40 wind chills.
Yeah. Yes.
I was outside like playing in the -10 degree weather, like just out dancing around.
Yeah, I was there.
So yesterday I see all these people walking. There are all these joggers out and all these people like with big smiles across their face. And I was like, stupid warm weather.
Jimmy, while we're doing this, and Christine, are you going to supply a link that goes to this fundraiser so that people know where to donate?
Yeah.
Okay.
If you just go to PorchSwingMinistries.org, you'll find a link right on the homepage.
There you go. Okay. Just wanted to make sure everybody understood where to go for that.
Well, and you can post the oh my gosh, where's my brain? Okay. You can post the blog that has the links in it on your podcast page.
I was going to say, people have to see that video. That video is awesome. I love it.
But you can post that on your podcast page as well with this episode.
Yeah.
And then people can do it right from your page.
That's awesome. Okay.
They can donate from your page.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, very easy. And
Jimmy, the idea for you for what you wanted to do to raise money for PorchSwing, I mean, that doesn't shock anybody. Everybody knows you like to walk in the snow and jump in the water, the icy water. Let me just say that. But I'm going to turn the tables on you and become the interviewer for a second, because I can, because I will.
Because I can.
I can and I will. But why PorchSwing? I mean, why not raise funds for your own ministry? Why are you doing this for us?
This is really, your ministry is so close to my heart. For what? Well, for one, we lived it.
Right.
We lived the trauma.
You are survivors. Yes.
Right.
But for another, it's just the sheer volume of desperate people who reach out to me because they know that I'm a minister, and they know that our church is a safe church.
Oh man, it is so safe.
And I think that just opens people up to just share their pain and their trauma. And I'm one person. So I'm not here to save the world. That Jesus already did that. But people who are that wounded by the church absolutely have to have a community who understands them, who believes in them, and who will help them lament and allow them to lament and to scream at God if they need to scream at God. They need that community. And PorchSwing offers that community, and it's a super safe community. You, Christine, are incredibly, incredibly gifted at just helping people who are in need. Natalie and I still talk about a time when you drove to our house, actually drove me because I was down ironically was down in your hometown, and we had a crisis that popped up, and you were like, you know what, we're gonna triage this. I still remember that. I remember your language. You were like, we're gonna triage this, and I'm gonna go spend a day or 2 days with you and Natalie, and I'm just gonna sit with you. And that's exactly what you did. And so I know because I lived being on the other side of this, that you, to answer your question, Mom, her question when all this first happened with our dad is, who ministers to the minister? Right. You became that minister to me, and I will never forget that. And my family will never forget that. And so it's a ministry I believe in. It's a ministry I support, and it's a ministry that I'm more than happy to send people over to, because they need that community. So that's why.
Wow. Well, those are some of the kindest words. It was an honor, always is an honor to walk through life with you, Jimmy. And Clara, you are an amazing, we got to sit down for the first time a couple of weeks ago. And what a precious moment, or hour, or whatever that was for me, to be able to really look into somebody's eyes who's been through, as a wife, what we've been through. There's a psychiatrist and theologian. He's he's an MD. That's his business. His name is Kurt Thompson. He's written a couple of books, and he's given a really good language to the idea of the need for healing in shared community. Because in shared community, you can be known by another in a way that is tremendously healing, that you can't experience outside in isolation, which is one of the difficulties of people the church outcasts, the abused who just can't go to church anymore because it hurts. They're outcasts. They don't have that shared community. So coming into the members only forum for survivors that we have on PorchSwing has been very powerful for a lot of people, because they're finding that shared community. But what was so powerful for me, Clara, about sitting down with you was being able to talk to somebody who knows what it's like to find out that they're the father of their children and the husband that they thought they had, and all those good memories, they were lies, every one of them. Right. And you didn't know. And people kind of look at you and go, how could you not have known? And you just can't explain it. Right. Not everybody understands that. Nobody can understand that unless they've been, how can you not have known he was? And it's like, you understand that. Right. And there are no words to explain it. That moment of just having somebody you don't have to explain it to, you can just look in their eyes and they get it. Right. That is so powerful. Mm-hmm. That's exactly the word. That was a gift, Christine. I'm sorry? Powerful. Yeah. Very, very powerful. Yeah. So that right there is a big part of the why of PorchSwing, to bring community to people who otherwise are isolated.
Yes. Yeah. Well, it's an awesome ministry. I stand behind it and I walk in the snow for it. And
love that.
And if we reach our goal of $5,000, I will jump in the water. When we reach,
hey, stop saying if we reach.
We have what's today, the 5th? Okay, so we've got 10 days. Yeah. 10 days, folks. Yep. 10 days to reach the 5,000.
Let's do it.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. Well, head over to PorchSwingMinistries.org, and I will post the link in the comments or in the description of this episode. And we thank you for being with us today, Christine.
Oh, it's been my honor and my pleasure. Always great to talk to you guys.
All right. Well, thank you to our listeners, and we'll catch you next episode. Thanks again for listening to today's episode of the Speaking Out on Sex Abuse podcast. If you found it helpful, please follow on Spreaker, subscribe on Google Play Music, Apple Podcasts, or Stitcher. Share with your friends and tell the world. Join us in speaking out on sex abuse so we can change the tides and prevent abuse.